Be seated. All right. Your next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Hughes, did there come a time when you conducted a forensic psychological evaluation of Amber Heard? And please tell the jury what a forensic psychological evaluation is.
Could you turn it on at the bottom base?
Okay. A forensic psychological evaluation is an evaluation that is conducted for the courts to answer a particular legal question. It contains multiple parts. Ms. Heard is not a client of mine. She's never been in therapy with me. She's not under my clinical care. It is an objective evaluation to determine a particular legal question. Forensic evaluation follows a methodology that what we say it's a multi-method, multi-hypothesis-driven methodology, which means I look at a variety of different documents and data using multiple hypotheses. It's not just one hypothesis, one theory of the case. You're going in looking to see, what possibly could be going on here. And then you use the data to arrive at that opinion. You look for consistency across the data to arrive at that opinion. And the forensic psychological evaluation has many parts. It has the clinical interview part, a structured or semi-structured clinical interview where I'm asking Ms. Heard lots of things about her life, both before Mr. Depp and after. It involves a psychological testing component of the evaluation, which allows me to do a good broad scan of different symptomatologies that people might have in their lives, as well as to have indicators of how she approached the test. Is she defensive? Is she malingering? Is she feigning? Is she exaggerating? It gives me indications about how she approached the evaluation. I review a number of documents, medical records, psychological records, the text, the audio, all the different things that we've had in this case, and then I conduct collateral interviews.
So, Dr. Hughes, just to be clear, do you assume everything the victim reports is true when you conduct these examinations?
No, of course not. I always approach a forensic evaluation with a healthy dose of skepticism. With any forensic evaluation, there exists a motivation that the individual may be telling you something that is not accurate. It doesn't mean that that's there, but you have to control for that and know that you're looking for, again, what does the data tell you, the external data, about what the person is also telling you.
Did the forensic evaluation follow a standard methodology, or was it specific to Ms. Heard?
No, this is my standard methodology that I would use with any individual who's in a forensic matter, and I would just call to evaluate them.
When did you meet with Amber Heard?
Okay, so I met with Ms. Heard for a total of about 29 hours. I met with her for the first time in September 2019. I saw her for 4 visits in live in my New York City office. That's about 21, 22 hours. And then I saw her twice over Zoom. One was in January 2021. And
New approach? Okay.
Dr. Curry, in answering that question, were you consulting anything?
Dr. Hughes.
Dr. I'm so sorry. Dr. Hughes, were you consulting anything? Dr. Curry's here, I guess, as well. That's a confusion.
I'm consulting my cheat sheet of the dates that I saw Ms. Heard so that I could accurately report to the court. I also have my final designation in front of me so that I could give the most accurate information to what I put in that report.
Okay. And do you want to see that? Okay. Should we just take the break now and have him look at it, or does he want to?
Would you like to look at it now or before cross-examination?
It's just a Post-it.
Okay, before cross-examination.
Okay,
All right,
that's
that's
fine.
fine. Thank you.
Okay. Please continue. I think you were telling us when you saw Ms. Heard.
Sure. So there were 4 dates in person in New York City for a total of about 21 and a half hours. And then I saw her in January 18th, 2021 over Zoom for 3 hours, and then December 27th, 2021 for 4 hours over Zoom.
And what did the evaluation consist of?
So as I stated, the evaluation consisted of psychological testing, a semi-structured clinical interview with Ms. Heard, a review of a whole host of documents relative to this case and medical records and psychological records, and then 3 collateral interviews, 2 with her treating therapist, Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, Dr. Connell Cohen, and also with her mom.
And in the semi-structured clinical interview, what were you assessing?
Well, when someone comes in for the evaluation, you sometimes don't know what you're going to see or what you're going to get. So you absolutely have to do a full clinical interview and have a sense of their life patterns, things that have affected them in their lives, you know, where they have worked, where they have lived, just get a full sense of their sort of being before the incident for which they're talking about. Then I do a full intimate partner violence assessment, looking at all those characteristics that I talked to you about earlier to get a sense of the full structure of and the dynamic of this relationship. I also did looking at what were the effects, what were the psychological consequences of being in that relationship. And I also looked at the psychological consequences of some of the statements that were made by Mr. Depp through his attorney that are part of this, the counterclaim in this lawsuit.
At the end of that process, considering all the data, did you arrive at any expert opinions?
Yes, I did.
All right, I would like to start with your main expert opinions and then go through those. Can you please tell the jury what your main opinions were?
So like I said, there are opinions embedded within them, but the main opinion is that Ms. Heard's report of intimate partner violence and the records that I reviewed is consistent with what we know in the field about intimate partner violence, characterized by physical violence, psychological aggression, sexual violence, coercive control, and surveillance behaviors.
And what was the other main opinion that you had?
The second main opinion was that that Ms. Heard demonstrated very clear psychological and traumatic effects or the exacerbation of trauma from those statements that Mr. Depp made through his attorney. There were 3 statements that we evaluated to see how they affected her emotionally and psychologically, and it was my determination that they did.
And did you arrive at any diagnostic conclusions?
Yes, I did.
And what were those?
I diagnosed Ms. Heard with post-traumatic stress disorder.
And what, if any, etiology was associated with the post-traumatic stress disorder?
So the etiology is the cause. In order to to meet criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, you have to have an actual cause. It's one of the few diagnostic entities that we have to have a cause for. And the cause was the intimate partner violence by Mr. Depp. That was what was pushing the symptoms. That was what's related to the intrusive phenomena. That was related to her avoidance. That was related to her differences in her mood. That was related to her avoidance efforts. So it was the cause was the intimate partner violence by Mr. Depp.
Okay. Now, let's first go back to the forensic evaluation. You mentioned you reviewed documents. What documents did you review?
So I'm going to refer to my list of documents so that I can be clear for you all. It is a 4-page.
All right. If you want to approach.
Dr. Curry, if you, I mean, Dr.
Dr.
Hughes,
Hughes.
I don't know why I keep
Oy.
doing that. My apologies. My apologies. Dr. Hughes. I think it's the confusion of having her in the courtroom. Dr. Hughes, if you need to consult your notes to answer something, let us know that you need to consult your notes. Otherwise, try to answer to the best of your ability. And then if you need to do that, just let us know you're consulting your notes, okay? The concern is that you not read from them, that you consult them as you need to, okay?
Correct. I just don't want this to be a memory test of having conducted many documents, 80 pages of notes,
But you
and 12
can-
psychological testings to,
You can reference your notes, just don't read from them, okay?
yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, great. So please tell us what documents you reviewed. Please tell the jury.
Okay, so I reviewed a number of documents, a plethora of documents, most, and I obviously won't read them all, but I reviewed certainly all of Ms. Hurd's testimony that she gave in her deposition testimony in this case, her deposition or her trial testimony in the UK case. I did the same thing for Mr. Depp. I reviewed his deposition testimony as well as his trial testimony in the UK as well. I reviewed a number of the depositions that were put forth in this case. I reviewed the psychological treatment notes for Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, Dr. Connell Cohen, Dr. Laurel Anderson, and Dr. Amy Banks, although she did not have treatment records. So I reviewed not only their records, did collateral interviews with some of them, and also read their deposition testimony, and also read other medical records in this case, nursing notes in this case, in the highlights. And I also listened to the audios that were put forth in this case and read the text messages and emails.
And what, if anything, did you do with respect to any videos?
And I also saw the video in the kitchen, yes.
Okay. Now, the collateral interviews that you conducted, why did you conduct those?
Well, collateral interviews is a standard part of a forensic evaluation. It's an opportunity to hear from another treating clinician, the person who's actually treating the individual you're evaluating, and get a better sense from that person of what they saw, what they knew, how they experienced this person. Sometimes our clinical notes don't give the full breadth of what really was going on in that therapy, because the notes are meant to be sort of short and to the point of what happened, who was there, and what was the plan. So it was really helpful to talk to these two clinicians who really were with Ms. Hurd throughout the duration of her relationship with Mr. Depp. So they give us sort of a contemporaneous look at what was going on for her emotionally, and then what was she reporting, what was she saying about the relationship to her therapist.
And you mentioned the name Dr. Bonnie Jacobs. Please tell the jury who Dr. Bonnie Jacobs is.
So Dr. Bonnie Jacobs was Ms. Hurd's therapist, and may I refresh my recollection with my notes, Your Honor?
She's allowed to
For the
consult the
dates,
notes.
if you'd like me to tell the dates.
If she's asking me a question, I'm not going to answer.
You're right, Your Honor. Yes.
May I?
Yes, you may consult your notes, yes.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we be heard?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So she treated with Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, who is a psychologist, from October 2011 through August 2014. She actually was seeing Dr. Jacobs somewhat earlier, before she got in the relationship with Mr. Depp. And then she transferred care to Dr. Connell Cohen, who was referred by Dr. Kipper, who was the treating physician for Mr. Depp, and then later for Miss Heard. And she treated with Dr. Cohen from after she left Dr. Bonnie Jacobs in September 2014 to June 7th, 2016.
Okay, thank you. And so and I guess you got ahead of me there, so you also talked to Dr. Connell Cohen, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also spoke with Paige Heard, did you say?
That's correct.
And who is Paige Heard?
Paige Heard is Amber Heard's mother.
Okay. And when did you speak with Paige Heard?
I spoke with all of these individuals at the end of 2019. Again, I can check my notes and let you know the exact date if you'd like.
I think the end of 19.
Yeah, they all were in
is
the
fine.
end of 19, yes.
All right. And are you aware that Paige Heard has since died? She died 2 years ago?
Yes, I am aware, sadly.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the psychological testing. You stated that you conducted psychological testing, is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you
Overruled all of.
Can you please tell the jury how many psychological assessments you administered to Amber Heard?
I administered 12.
Can you please tell the jury which ones you administered?
So I am going to refer to my designation that has the list so that I don't forget anything.
Okay.
So I administered,
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
She can refresh her recollection.
As long as she's not reading it.
Right. You just can't read. You're not supposed to read from it, but you can refresh your recollection as you're speaking.
so I can look and just look up, and that's refreshing my recollection? Okay.
All right, if we could approach for a moment.
Dr. Hughes, can you tell the jury the tests that you administered, please?
Yes, I can. I administered the Personality Assessment Inventory, which is a broadband instrument to scan for psychopathology and psychological symptoms that people have. I administered the Trauma Symptom Inventory, too, which is an instrument to scan for common traumatic effects that people have. I administered the Miller Forensic Assessment of Symptoms Test, which is a measure of malingering. I administered the Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder Checklist for the 5th edition for the DSM-5. I administered the Clinician-Administered PTSD Scale for DSM-5. I administered the Beck Depression Inventory, the Beck Anxiety Inventory, the Mood Disorders Questionnaire, the Danger, I did 3 intimate partner violence measures, the conflict tactic scale, the abusive behavior observation checklist, and the danger assessment scale. And then I also did the life events checklist, which scans and gets us to ask about a lot of traumatic events that an individual may have experienced, and we administer that typically before either doing the PCL or doing the CAPS.
Thank you. Were there any tests you administered to Amber Heard that were designed to reveal malingering or feigning?
Yes, there were.
Okay, can you please tell the jury about those?
So malingering is the false production of psychological symptomatology for the purpose of some external material gain. Feigning is the false projection of psychological symptomatology with no identification of what that gain may be. So basically feigning is saying your mental health is worse than it actually is. So I administered 3 of the tests, had validity indices built in that could allow us to address that question. The MFAS, the Miller Assessment, a Forensic Assessment of Symptoms test, is a specific malingering instrument. It looks at malingering psychopathology. Is this someone, malingering psychopathology? She scored a 0 on that scale. So on that test, sorry, not the scale, that test. So on that test, there was no evidence of malingering. On the TSI, there are 2 validity indices, and she scored within the normal range on those scores as well. One was slightly elevated, but when in testing the limits, because it has rare symptoms and over-endorsed symptoms, I determined that also was a valid measure. And then finally, the PAI, the large scale, 344 question instrument, has very robust validity scales on it to test for exaggeration or feigning or malingering, and she did not score in any of those scores and those scales at all. Those were not elevated. So the combined results between those 3 tests suggest to me that Ms. Heard is not malingering her psychological symptomatology.
Now, Dr. Curry testified that one test showed, quote, intentional exaggeration in the 98th percentile, meaning that she engaged in extreme levels of exaggeration, end of quote. Do you agree with that?
I do not.
Why?
Because that test, the scale that she is referring to is it's called ATR. It's the atypical response scale. As I said, that